Welcome to Defining Moments. I'm Suzanne Quast, and today we are talking brain health with the one and only Max Lugavere. Max is a filmmaker, he is a health and science journalist, author of the New York Times best-selling book, Genius Foods. He also has the #1 health podcast on iTunes called The Genius Life. He is the brain health expert. Well, back in 2010, Max realized that his mother, who was only 58 at the time, started exhibiting some early signs of dementia. And since then, he has dedicated his entire life to not only understand what happened to her, but to help prevent it from happening to himself and to you. His goal is to help reduce brain decline and help us push our cognitive health span to its natural limits. You see, Max has done a lot of research, and what is so empowering about all the research that he's done is that ultimately we have a lot of control, and that's through our diet and our environment. Today, Max is going to cover all of that, and I'm really honored to share his story. Here are his moments. Listen as the silence fades. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh my God, what an honor. Privilege.
Super excited. Everybody in the studio is excited to have Max here.
Pressure's on. I hope I can deliver.
First and foremost, I wanted to give my condolences for the loss of your mother.
Thank you so much.
I lost my mom 13 years ago, and it was the hardest thing I've ever been through.
Yeah, I mean, it's literally the worst thing that's ever happened to me, and in many ways, you know, in nearly every conceivable way, it's motivated my work, you know, and that's sort of, I guess, the silver lining of it all, that through that tragedy and her struggle, I get to help other people. You know.
But that's really, honestly, remarkable and inspiring. And thank you for all the awareness that you're creating, that, you know, to help prevent other people from suffering like your mother did and like your family has. And something I'd like to start with was in your book, you know, you talked about back in 2010, your mom started exhibiting some signs like brain fog and stuff.
Yeah.
But you said there was a moment, I think it was in 2011, that you were with your mom, your brother, and your father, and you were all in the same room, and your mom didn't know what the date was or what the year was.
Yeah, I mean, that was the first time really that it was sort of like in a movie when they add in that sound effect, like the record stopping all of a sudden to like a screeching halt. That's when, for me, I realized that something was seriously wrong. I mean, you know, you can complain about brain fog all you want, and certainly on the standard American diet, I think brain fog is something that's common to all of us.
100%.
Right? Like, you eat a huge bowl of pasta for the next few hours afterwards, you're like in a food coma, essentially. That term exists for that reason, right? But for my mom, it dawned on me that it was a little more severe, and it all came to a head, so to speak, we were on a family trip in Miami, and my mom announced to the family that she had been seeing a neurologist. And that, to me, was, you know, I mean, I guess I didn't think that much of it. I kind of just had assumed that at a certain point, you get to a certain age, you start seeing more doctors,
That's
right?
just things you check off your list.
Right. But then she couldn't recall the year. We asked her what year it was, almost mockingly at that point. Like, we were almost like patronizing what she was telling us, because again, we were so completely ignorant. We had no prior family history of dementia or anything like that. So we were joking with her. We were like, okay, well, if you're really having such problems, like, here, we're going to ask you this really easy question and see if you can answer it. And she couldn't recall the year. And so that was pretty hard to bear witness to. And we kept kind of antagonizing her, actually, and she started to cry. And for me, I mean, I'm the oldest child in my family. I was my mom's first child, and I've always had a very close relationship with my mom. So that's when I realized that something was wrong and that I had to step in. And I had all of the conditions in my life that brought me to that point really were, it set the stage for me to go with my mom and to really help and to, you know,
dive into it.
Dive into it, yeah. I think when in moments like that where we're scared and confused, especially, you know, facing the potential of having a complex chronic condition like dementia, you know, we need help. You know, we go to these doctors' offices and they run these esoteric tests, and They prescribe these pills that act nothing, most of the time they're little more than biochemical band-aids, I call them. And so I really wanted to be there for my mom. I had this training as a journalist, and so I knew that at the very least I'd be able to go with her and ask questions and take notes and remember what was going on, which is not something that many people can do under those conditions.
You're right. And so then after doing all of this research, you found that there was a direct correlation to your diet, right, in particular?
Yeah, absolutely. I started looking into the medical literature, and I found a huge amount of research highlighting not only the risk factors that would predispose a person to developing dementia, Alzheimer's disease, even Parkinson's disease, as well as a number of clinical trials that look at how various nutrients or food, medical grade food products or even dietary patterns can improve cognition and minimize your risk for developing further cognitive decline, or even, what we consider normal, the normal decline that comes with aging.
Yep.
So, and I don't claim to know everything. Certainly, the irony is that we know more about space than we know about our own brains.
Which is kind of crazy.
Which is kind of crazy, right? But that being said, I think we do have enough research that we can draw on, that we don't have to sit idly on our hands as we await whatever sort of fate is in our genetic hand of cards, so to speak.
I think something cool about your journey, too, is that you didn't yes, you were a journalist, but you didn't have necessarily a medical degree. So you didn't have any ulterior motives. It was just truly to get the information in an unbiased way to try to help get the clearest, most accurate results as to why this was occurring.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I mean, when you're trained as a journalist, I worked for a TV network called Current TV, which was founded by Al Gore, and granted,
kind of a big deal, but
well, it was I had an amazing 6 years in living in LA that I got to do that, where I got to work with some of the best journalists in the field, and the person who gave me my job, actually, the person who plucked me out of college to put me on camera so that I could present for the network and be a journalist, he's known for giving unconventional talent their first jobs. He gave Anderson Cooper his first job.
Oh, that's cool.
Lisa Lynn. Yeah, these are well-known people in the world of journalism, right? And so that was what I did straight out of college, and I got to learn a lot about how to communicate potentially inflammatory ideas, and how to investigate a topic, and how to ask questions and be a skeptic, and separate good, credible sources from sources that are perhaps less so. So in many ways, you're kind of trained like a scientist.
Yeah.
Not as rigorously, I didn't leave it with a PhD after my name, but when all these health, woes started to occur to my mom, I was like, okay, well, I'm gonna step in here, And the other thing that I had that very few people have when they're faced with the kind of trauma that I was faced with, I had media credentials, and so that allowed me to kind of exploit those in a way that allowed me to reach out to scientists and researchers and hear firsthand accounts of what the science was actually saying about how our diets affect our brains.
So then let's talk on a high level about what the Genius Plan is.
Yeah.
And then from there, I have so many viewer questions, and thank you to everybody who reached out. And I feel like we can cover a lot of ground with a lot of the questions they had.
Yeah.
So start first with what the Genius Plan is.
Yeah, so basically it's a plan. Look, it's not rocket science. It's giving your brain the nutrients that it needs to continue to create healthy new brain cells for the entirety of your life, which we now know is within the realm of possibility, as well as giving your brain the antioxidants that we know help shield it against the many insults thrown at it by the modern world. So, the modern world, we have this incredible burden of, hyper-processed foods, environmental, everyday chemicals in our environment that act like toxins. Maybe if you were encountering just a small handful of them on a day-to-day basis.
Like what? Give me an example.
Well, everything from, and these don't necessarily relate to Alzheimer's disease or dementia in a clear way, but, lately I've been obsessed with phthalates, and these are plasticizing compounds, they're found in reusable plastic bottles.
Okay.
Or single-use plastic bottles, phthalates, bisphenol A, which, is like BPA people are really concerned with, heavy metals from lead to mercury to arsenic. But even in our foods, we have various compounds like dietary emulsifiers, which promote inflammation in the gut. antibiotic overuse. So there's all these like things. It's just like a never-ending onslaught. And so, you know, our bodies have an amazing capacity to defend themselves to a point. The problem is today the scale's being tipped so far in the direction of like, you know, this onslaught. Actually, in the first chapter of my book, I kind of call it like the Hunger Games for your brain. Like your brain is like thrust into this world as like an unwitting combatant, and there's all these insults being thrown at it from, you know, the ultra processed foods that we're consuming day in and day out for 16 hours every single day, which is completely out of harmony with the circadian inclinations of our bodies, right? We're eating constantly throughout the day, and the foods that we're eating are, you know, these grain products that shoot our blood sugar through the roof. They're depleted of essential nutrients, right? So this is one of the reasons why 90% of Americans are deficient in at least one essential nutrient. And so we're not equipping our bodies to defend themselves even to like low-level toxic exposures.
Okay.
Yeah, most of us are deficient, and we're just inundated with, you know, sedentary lifestyle, stress, lack of sleep. The list goes on and on and on. It's like we need a holistic approach, because there's a whole list of problems that we now are faced with.
So yours is basically like the Bible for this is how you should be.
Yeah, yeah.
And how you should live and what you should eat.
Exactly. Yeah.
So then let's start with that. What are your top 7 foods that you think everybody should be consuming for the best brain function and health?
So avocados, I know, you know, we're in California. People are down with avocados.
I know, because of I threw all mine out.
Why?
Because there was like some recall. So I'm going to go out and get more avocados.
Interesting. Yeah, I didn't hear about that. Avocados are dope. They have the highest concentration of fat-protecting antioxidants of any fruit or vegetable. So this is important to the brain because the brain is made of fat. So the brain loves fat-protecting antioxidants like vitamin E, carotenoids like beta-carotene, lutein, zeaxanthin. Avocados are very dense in those exact nutrients that the brain needs. I'm a big fan of grass-fed beef. I know it's somewhat controversial.
We have a lot of questions about grass-fed beef,
yeah,
so I'm excited.
So I think it's a health food, especially if you're a premenopausal woman, or if you happen to give blood regularly. It's the most bioavailable source of iron. It's an amazing source of vitamin E, again, which is a fat-soluble antioxidant. It's got carotenoids like lutein and zeaxanthin. It's got creatine in it, which, you know, creatine you might have heard of for it's a sports supplement.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah.
Yeah, but it also is very important for proper brain function.
Okay.
So grass-fed beef, I think, is key. Nuts, I'm a big fan of, again, because of the preponderance of grass-fed. I mean, of grass-fed.
It's like grass-fed nuts.
Yeah.
What?
of fat-soluble antioxidants and minerals that we know that the brain
What
needs.
nuts?
Well, almonds, I think, are definitely like a staple, a go-to, but really all nuts. The thing that you want to watch out for is you don't want them to be roasted, because typically that means that they're fried. So if you're buying nuts that aren't raw, you want to make sure that they're dry roasted.
Okay, that's a good tip.
Yeah. Dark leafy greens, one of the, I think, key recommendations in that I make in my book, it's sort of like my version of like the celery juice thing. Like,
okay.
Eat a big salad every single day. Like, just set that as a rule for yourself. Like, eat a big fatty salad, fill it with dark leafy greens like kale, spinach, and arugula, drench it with extra virgin olive oil, and that's going to be like one of the best things that you can do for your brain. Actually, research out of Rush University found that people who do that, who adhere to that rule every day, eating a big, you know, bowl of dark leafy greens, have brains that perform up to 11 years younger.
Really?
Yeah.
And then, side note, I have to ask, you brought it up. What do you think of the celery juice thing?
The celery juice thing, you know, I think celery is very good for you, and celery juice is very healthy. But, you know, the claims that it's sort of like this miracle cure-all, I don't think it's unfounded by science. But certainly there's like lots of anecdotes that bubble up on the internet. People feel very religiously about this.
They do.
So, you know, I'm not like hating on it in any capacity, but I don't think that it's like this magical potion that people sort of claim it to be.
So maybe it's like the placebo effect. People are taking it, and therefore they think.
Yeah, and they're also probably making other modifications to their diets and lifestyles. They're adhering to the diet that has been promoted by the guy who created the celery juice craze. So, you know, I get the same amount of people. I get thousands of messages from people all around the world that my protocol has helped them lift their brain fog, you know, drop the pounds off of their waistlines, and, you know, sleep better, and all that, you know, all the same sorts of things. So it's really, one single food is not really enough to move the ship, you know, move the needle in any one direction. It's about the dietary pattern as a whole.
Okay. All right, so we have 4. Sorry, I just needed to hear about the celery juice.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, it's good. I'll drink it. So, you know, why not? Like, I think it's tasty. It's full of minerals.
It doesn't
potassium.
lose it all when you juice it?
No, I mean, you lose the fiber, obviously. You
Yeah.
know, but I also like celery. I mean, celery is great. It serves as a really amazing vehicle for almond butter.
It does.
You
Oh
know,
my
you
God, I
can't
love almond butter.
Mix almond butter in your celery juice. It's like
right?
it's not the
that
same.
would be disgusting.
Yeah.
I mean, you could.
You could if you really wanted to.
Okay, 5.
So big fan of cruciferous vegetables, like broccoli, cauliflower, radishes, cabbage. The thing about cruciferous vegetables that are so important is that they help our bodies detox. So people are obsessed with like detox teas these days.
Which is ridiculous.
Yeah, it's.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Like,
Your body has an incredible capacity to detoxify. And one of the things that these cruciferous vegetables do is they upregulate the production of a compound in your body called glutathione, which is actually your body's master detoxifier.
okay.
So consume, raw cruciferous vegetables, or if you cook them. One of the hacks that I like to do, I like to sprinkle a little bit of mustard seed powder.
You talk a lot about mustard seed powder.
Yeah.
Okay, why do you like mustard seed powder?
Well, it's a hack. It basically, so mustard is a cruciferous vegetable. Yeah.
I don't think I knew that.
Yeah,
but...
few people realize this, like mustard greens, Mustard seed are basically the seeds of the mustard plant, and it's a cruciferous vegetable. So what happens is when you cook cruciferous vegetables, an enzyme gets degraded that creates one of these detoxifying compounds. And so you lose the ability to create that in a cooked bowl or a plate of broccoli. When you sprinkle mustard seed powder on that bowl of on the cooked broccoli, you basically provide that enzyme that gets destroyed, and you basically regain the ability to create, those detoxifying abilities.
What about all those vegetables that cause like bloating and gas? Is that one of the byproducts? I love those vegetables, by the way.
For some people, they can create those problems. I mean, I tend to think that it's usually if you're not used to eating vegetables and then from one day to the next you eat a ton, that's when you're going to have those symptoms. But if vegetables, I think, if they're a staple part of your diet and you're eating them on a regular basis, I think that you adapt. And part of the way that you adapt is you cultivate bacteria that have a greater ability to break those, perhaps less digestible parts of the plant down.
Okay.
So it's like the problem is if you go from one day of eating the standard American diet and then you start eating like lots and lots of vegetables, then you're going to feel bloating and you're probably going to nobody wants that.
No.
But I think if you slowly start to add these vegetables into your diet, that's a good thing. And then, of course, there are different conditions that people may have, like irritable bowel syndrome and small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. Like, if it really presents a problem to you, you should not hesitate to go and see a doctor. But yeah, just take it slow with the veggies and add them like.
I'm just curious.
Yeah. Well, I eat lots of vegetables and they don't have that effect on me.
Good to know.
And I know other people that, they don't have that effect on.
So, okay, we have 5. Now we need 2 more.
2 more. Well, dark chocolate is
which is amazing.
Which is
Who
amazing.
doesn't love some dark chocolate in their lives?
Rejoice. Dark chocolate's great. It's a great source of magnesium.
Does that help you sleep?
It can, but I mean, chocolate also has a little bit of caffeine in it. So, but yeah, I think the magnesium probably, the caffeine in dark chocolate, I don't think is going to be that big a deal for most people. But it has these phytochemicals in it that research has shown can actually boost cognitive function. People who habitually consume chocolate tend to have better memory function. So
look at that.
Yeah, and there's all these studies that can boost cardiovascular health. The key to buying chocolate, you just want to make sure that it's a high cacao percentage. And you also want to look on the back and make sure that the cocoa hadn't been processed with alkali, which degrades the health benefits of those phytochemicals.
Okay, and 1 more?
Man, 1 more. I guess extra virgin olive oil. I'm a big fan of extra virgin olive oil. It should be the only oil that you guys really use liberally.
Okay.
It's got a bunch of research supporting it. Humans have been crushing olives to make extra virgin olive oil for thousands of years. It's not like one of these newer like canola oil or corn oil, which we've only had in the food supply for the past 100 years. So it's something that we've had for a very long time, almost like red wine. And it's very good for you. I mean, it's got a very favorable fatty acid profile. It's anti-inflammatory. And I also think it's delicious. It just adds a wonderful sort of Mediterranean vibe to anything that you're eating.
I couldn't agree more. Well, one of the questions that somebody had is grapeseed oil really that bad for you? I've been using it to cook rice for over 25 years.
Yeah, it's not the best. First of all, it's predominantly a very delicate kind of fat called polyunsaturated fat. So it's the last thing you want to do with an oil like that is heat it. But then it's not healthful because, I mean, it's very high, first of all, in omega-6 fatty acids, which are essential. We need to get a small amount of them. But they contain omega-6 fatty acids in a ratio with omega-3 fatty acids of about 700 to 1. So, I mean,
that's a lot.
It's a lot.
Oh my gosh,
yeah.
What is it supposed to be, like 1 to 1, the ratio?
Yeah,
or maybe
1 to
like
1 or maybe 3 to 1. Yeah, exactly.
But not 700 to 1?
700 to 1.
What does that do to your body?
Well, the thinking is that it tilts your body into a pro-inflammatory state, because the problem is omega-6 provide the raw materials to your body's inflammation pathways. And so inflammation is like the cornerstone not only to, you know, chronic disease, obesity, type 2 diabetes, Alzheimer's disease, heart disease, but it's also, you know, it affects the way your brain works and affects how you feel and your, you know, the comfort of your stomach, for example. So, yeah, I would say cut it out.
Cut it out, sorry. Well, we brought up rice there. So somebody else asked, well, if you look at the Asians, they eat a diet high in rice, yes, also high in fish, but why are they able to consume so much rice and have less issues with brain health?
Yeah, I don't think that rice is like toxic or anything like, you know, people have like this, people take these different sides, right? Like the paleo side, the keto side, and they kind of like to demonize foods. I don't think that rice is that bad for you, but I think when you look at the Japanese population, their diet as a whole is quite healthy, as are their lifestyles. I mean, all the studies that really show the healthfulness of the Japanese diet are sourced from parts of Japan like Okinawa, where, you know, they have these like really rich senses of community, higher purposes, they're active all day. Rice is a very nutrient poor, energy rich starch. I think today when we look statistically at the fact that most people in the United States have problems with blood sugar regulation, right? Like half of people in the US are either diabetic or either type 2 diabetic or pre-diabetic. And we look at the prevalence of nutrient deficiencies, which, as I mentioned, 90% of Americans are deficient in at least one essential nutrient. It just doesn't seem like the best choice to fill up the limited real estate on your plate and in your stomachs in the US. You know, if you're eating the Japanese dietary pattern and you're spending, you know, lots of time like outdoors and you've got this sense of a higher purpose and you're eating lots of fatty fish and your diet isn't saturated in grain and seed oils like canola oil, corn oil, you know, and the like, then I think it's potentially fine. But today, to add rice into a diet that's already full of processed, you know, refined carbohydrates and unhealthy oils, and we're more sedentary than ever before.
Got it.
You know, I just don't think it's the best choice. But I'll certainly eat some white rice after a workout on my sushi. You know, I don't think that there's going to be that much harm to come from that.
And what about the French diet? I feel like there's a lot of like, you know, bread and butter, but it's in limited amounts.
Yeah.
Or do you think, again, it goes back to it's just a different diet and the way the food's being made over there as opposed to in the United States?
Yeah. I think those dietary patterns are probably healthy, not because of the bread and the butter or the rice in the case of the Japanese. I think that they're healthy in spite of those things. Like, you know, in France, I've been there, the portion sizes are tiny.
Super small.
So they're able to control their health in a totally different way. They're just eating like way less of everything, right? So there's all these confounding variables, and that's why nutrition science is so complicated. And that sort of, you know, the fact that there are no clear answers are why people get to exploit our collective ignorance about nutrition, right?
Yeah.
Like you get people in the paleo camp and whatever. So, you know, the reason why I choose to avoid bread and those kinds of things is because, you know, wheat is a very nutrient-poor, energy-rich source of, you know, what I consider to be empty calories ultimately, and gluten, which I think that, you know, a lot of people today have problems digesting. And so I choose to avoid it. Do I think it's toxic? No. I mean, in an ideal world, you'd have gut resilience. You'd be able to eat a little bit of gluten and be okay with it and move on. We'd be active enough where, you know, the occasional empty, you know, calories from wheat or whatever wouldn't be that big of a deal. But because I see people, you know, that have, real problems, and I look at the statistics of the population as a whole, I don't recommend consuming those foods, you know.
Got it. Okay, somebody else brought up an interesting question. And they said they were watching Mike the Vegan. And they said this is less about him versus about talking about places where you have heard, where this person has heard the cons to the keto diet. They basically say that the keto diet with inherent risk is evidenced by the extensive list of adverse reactions reports in the scientific literature. And they talk about the adverse reactions of inflammation risk, hair and thinning loss, impaired concentration and cognition. They just said, what is your response to this? They just said, I'm so confused with where to get my information from. And are the potential adverse reactions worth it to try the keto diet? There's a lot in there. And I understand this person's concern.
Yeah.
I think nowadays, you know, you actually talked about this in your book, where one minute you're being told butter's bad for you, the next put it in your coffee.
Yeah.
One minute they're like, oh, in order to lose weight, you just need to exercise. And now it's like, no, it's 80% diet.
Yeah.
So I think I get a little bit, maybe they're just, you know, confused. You hear one side say the keto diet's great and another person come out and say the keto diet's horrible.
Yeah. I think the keto diet can be great. I don't think it's not a magic bullet necessarily, and I think that there's certain applications where you might strongly consider it. For example, if you had hard to treat epilepsy or if you had a neurological condition. I think the real value of ketones to me are in what they do for the brain, and also the notion that intermittent ketosis, seasonal ketosis, what have you, I think makes a lot of sense from an evolutionary standpoint. I don't think you have to be in ketosis all the time. In terms of the potential downsides, I mean, the only potential downsides that I can think of are that it's not the easiest diet to adhere to. And so if you choose to do the ketogenic diet and you realize that you're cutting out a lot of your favorite foods, then, you know, that might be disheartening to you, and you might feel that it's setting you up for a rebound, perhaps, where you then start eating lots of unhealthy foods afterwards. But for people that find it easy to adhere to, like I find it pretty easy to adhere to, there are no downsides.
What about the high cholesterol?
Well, that's a more complicated topic, but, you know, first of all, the cholesterol that we eat has very little impact for most people on blood cholesterol. And even when it does affect your cholesterol, the relationship that has to your risk for heart disease is complicated, and it's not necessarily a causal connection. In the keto camp, I'm not one of the people that advocates for high saturated fat consumption. You know, like even when I'm doing a keto diet, I'm not eating blocks of cheese and putting butter on everything and drinking coconut oil, because I think that certain people with certain genes do respond differently to saturated fat. So I think you can do a clean, you know, quote unquote version of the keto diet that is more likely to lead to an adverse response in terms of your blood lipids like cholesterol. So when I do a keto diet, I'm, you know, really focusing on lots of extra virgin olive oil, Mediterranean fats, you know, like not necessarily butter and coconut oil, which are more tropical, but lots of extra virgin olive oil, tons of vegetables. I think also the thing is people have this like misconception about what the keto diet means. They think it's all like cream, eggs, butter, blocks of cheese. My version of the ketogenic diet includes tons of vegetables. And so when you're eating lots of vegetables and lots of properly raised meat, I can't think of a single adverse reaction that would occur.
Got it. So it's not taking the keto diet to the extreme of putting butter and saturated fat on everything.
Correct.
It's like you said, it's a mix between Mediterranean and keto.
Yeah, totally.
So marry them.
Yeah.
So this says, you talk a lot about grass-fed beef, but what are your thoughts on other meats like poultry?
Yeah, I'm a fan of poultry if it's free range, antibiotic free. You know, I like it's good to get the dark meat. You get collagen, you know, when you're eating meat around the joint, you tend to get collagen, which not many people, you know, we tend to not eat collagenous organ meats and skin so much, you know, anymore. So I'm a big fan of chicken. You know, it's a great source of protein, selenium.
What do you think then of the documentary What the Health, where it talks about the you know, carcinogenic effects and the awful...
That documentary is pure propaganda. And I'm cool with vegans. Like, you know, if you want to be a vegan, by all means, go for it. But the fact that documentary masquerades as like this science film, it's bogus. So, yeah, I mean, animal products, there's no known vegan hunter-gatherer community. We were not vegan for the vast majority of our evolution. It's really a luxury that we get to decide to adhere to today. And I think many people do it for moral reasons, and that's fine. I don't argue those points. But from a purely health perspective, there's really no good reason to avoid meat if it's properly raised, if the animals are humanely raised. Many of the studies that are used in that documentary are epidemiological studies where they look at the population as a whole and they look at how meat consumption is consumed and they tie those to health outcomes. When you zoom out and look at the way that most people are consuming meat in the United States, it's fast food.
Yeah,
it's like
you're
burgers
right.
from Burger King and McDonald's, and they're not just eating meat with those meals. They're eating, the refined white flour bun. They're eating the French fries fried in, super unhealthy oils. They're drinking the supersized Coke. And so it's just really hard to tease out the effect that meat is having at that population level. And that's the problem with studies like that.
Got it.
And meat, you can look at like vegetable consumption and you're going to get a much different response, because people that are consuming vegetables, right? Like it's a lot more difficult to screw up broccoli than it is meat, right? Because meat you
don't know where it comes from. It's hard to.
Right, you can get it from a factory farmed cow and you can put it in a burger and serve it in the form of a Happy Meal.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, one final question, and that's that you talk a lot about eggs.
Yeah.
But this person's really concerned about their cholesterol. And what would be your response to that?
For most people, the cholesterol that you eat has no bearing.
Again, this goes back to what you were saying about the...
Yeah,
okay.
There are always going to be exceptions in biology. So that's the thing. There's no one-size-fits-all diet, but I would say for the vast majority of people, do not be afraid of dietary cholesterol.
Like my fiance won't eat egg yolks because he's like, he has high cholesterol.
Yeah.
I'm like, but you really should. It's really good for you. But then I'm like, am I killing him by...
No, I mean, I think there's some people respond to saturated fat differently, and they'll have an exaggerated lipid response. Other people hyperabsorb cholesterol from the gut. But for most people, actually, when you eat cholesterol, your liver then will produce less of it. And every single day, your liver produces about 4 egg yolks worth of cholesterol anyway. So cholesterol is not like this thing that's trying to kill us. It's required for health. Every cell in your body has cholesterol in it. If it were toxic or, a dietary devil, like, we wouldn't be producing it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, this was amazing. I feel like we didn't even get to half of the questions. So you'll just have to come back and do a part 2.
I'm down. I'm super down.
Right?
Anytime.
All right. Tell everybody about your new book. When's it coming out? What are you doing? What's it called?
Man, well, I don't have those details yet. I, just stay tuned. Follow me on Instagram at Max Lugavere, or listen to my podcast, The Genius Life. My first book, Genius Foods, is still out. It's still,
amazing,
helping lots and lots of people. So pick that up wherever you buy books, Genius Foods.
And just follow him on social media and go to his website. He is honestly, every post I learned something new. Thank you guys for watching.
Breaking waves.